Hi, I'm here to talk to you about how farmed Atlantic salmon have a negative effect on the environment and human health. First, let's talk about what is an Atlantic salmon. It is a saltwater and freshwater fish that is located mainly in North America. It lives most of its life in saltwater except when it needs to spawn, at which point it travels to freshwater. The freshly spawned fry then migrate back into the oceans to live their life there until it's their turn to spawn. However, over the years, Atlantic salmon populations have decreased tremendously. This is mainly due to fishermen exploiting the extremely valuable fish. In an attempt to end the exploitation of wild-caught Atlantic salmon, the fishing industry's solution was fish farms. So what is a fish farm? According to Google's definition, fish farms are a place where fish are artificially bred or cultivated for food, to restock lakes for angling, or to supply aquariums. But for our purposes, Atlantic salmon, fish farms are for just food. Most fish farms, in fact, are for Atlantic salmon because that is where the money is. In North America alone, it is a $450 million industry. So let me explain how a fish farm works. Basically, thousands of fish are put into an open net cages where they are raised until they are big enough to harvest. To the right of the screen, you can see an example of one of these cages. In one site for fish farms, you will see dozens of these cages, and the numbers of fish range from 500,000 to 1,000,000 fish per site. These fish are fed the cheapest food possible, which includes grains and tons of whatever bait fish and organic matter they pull out from around the sites. Fish farming is an extremely easy and cheap way to produce a lot of fish. Before I dive into the negative effects of fish farming, let me first tell you some of the benefits. Since it is so much cheaper to pull thousands of fish out of cages and ship them to supermarkets rather than going on a boat and fishing for them, it leads to cheaper priced fish in the supermarkets. This allows for poor families to enjoy the benefits of eating salmon and not feel it too hard on their wallets. Going along with the economic value of fish farming, it creates hundreds to thousands of jobs for people so they can support their families. From an environmental perspective, it has been very effective in cutting down the exploitation of wild-caught salmon. Those benefits are all great things, but there are quite a few negative impacts of farm salmon. Starting with how, for fish farms to make maximum profit off the salmon, they had to genetically change the species of salmon, which I'll dive into later on why that is a bad thing. Other than that, large populations of fish in one area lead to large amounts of organic matter from the fish getting to the sea and bay floor, which can destroy the surrounding ecosystems. Also, large amounts of pesticides, antibiotics, vaccines, and other chemicals are released in the water in order to preserve the fish farms. These can also leach into surrounding ecosystems and kill off plant and sea life. And even after all the precautions to keep the farms healthy, they get infected with sea lice, which again I will dive into later and tell you why that is so bad. And to top it off, top predators like sea lions, dolphins, and porpoises can get caught in the cages and die, and are killed by farmers because of their threat to fish in the farms. As promised, I am now going to tell you why the genetic change of the species of Atlantic salmon is a bad thing. First, I'm going to explain the human health factor of eating a genetically modified salmon. If you look at the picture on the screen, you can see the difference in the look of a farm versus wild salmon. And the worst part about it is that even the very pale pink color to the farm salmon isn't real. That is artificial coloring that is added to the fish to make it look more like a wild-caught salmon. And if you look at the difference in white lines on the actual fish meat, they are a lot bigger on the farmed fish. Now, why are white lines bad? Because that is the fat in the meat. Farmed salmon has an enormous amount more fat in the wild than in the wild caught. Here's a chart I found which shows the difference in nutritional value from a wild caught to a farmed salmon. On the left is wild caught and on the right is farmed salmon. Wild caught has more calcium, iron, potassium, and zinc, while having less calories, fat, sodium, and saturated fats. What's not seen on the chart is that farmed salmon have higher concentrations of PCBs, which are not found in wild-caught salmon. Also, the artificial coloring, toxic byproducts, antibiotics, and other drugs that are in farmed salmon. And finally, while the farmed salmon have more omega-3s, which are vital to human cell growth, it also contains more omega-6s, which are pro-inflammatory and are linked to heart diseases, diabetes, and cancer. But enough of the human effects. Let's get back to the environmental impacts. In a scientific study and experiment done by L.F. Sundstrom, M. Lomas, W.E. Timechuk, and Robert H. Devlin, they found the major environmental difference between the genetically modified salmon and wild-caught salmon. Their results concluded that the genetically modified salmon grows 2.7 times longer and 25 times heavier than the wild-caught in the same amount of time of growth. To the right of the slide, the differences between the sizes of the fish that grew in the experiment are shown. They let the farm salmon and wild-caught salmon eat whatever and however much they wanted to eat in the experiment. They found out that the farm fish require much more food consumption. This means the amount of food needed to support farm salmon actually outweighs the amount of fish that is harvested for human consumption. They also observed the fish and how they react in wild habitats. They found that farm fish are more competitive in nature. They are less discriminate in choosing prey, meaning they will eat whatever they can to survive. Farm salmon are less affected by predators when making foraging decisions, and farm salmon do better with lower quality food. So due to natural selection, farm salmon would outcompete wild salmon in nature. But why is this a problem if farm salmon are just in fish farm cages and not in nature? Well, the cages aren't the most secure. It's been documented that at mostly every farm site, thousands of fish have escaped into the wild. If farms keep letting these fish out, it could lead to the end of the Atlantic salmon. Also, as I said earlier, sea lice have a large negative effect on the environment. Sea lice is a parasite that feeds off of fish. A picture of sea lice on a salmon fry can be seen to the right. Fish farms do not try to eliminate the populations of sea lice, but make it so their fish can withstand the parasite. So when they genetically modified the salmon, they made it so the fry are strong enough to withstand the lice. This is a good thing for farm fish, but a bad for fish around the farms, because parasites are now able to live in enormous populations in fish farms because there is a lot of food in a small area. This is very bad for wild salmon because salmon fry swim by the farms to get to the oceans. Adult salmons are strong enough to withstand the sea lice, but the baby salmon are not. A study was done in British Columbia where they tried to see the effect of sea lice on a wild salmon population. They found that salmon fry are 73% more likely to be infected with sea lice if they swim by a fish farm than if they don't. And juvenile salmon that get infected, up to 95% of them end up dying. They did these tests for a couple of years and found populations were decreasing every year. They predict within a couple of generations the population will decrease 99%. When populations of Atlantic salmon drop this much and the genetically modified salmon takes over, it will throw ecosystems out of whack. The amount of lower level fish will decrease because the amount of food is consumed by the genetically modified salmon, and the predator population will decrease because natural predators avoid the genetically modified salmon. Fish farming is an extremely large and growing industry. As I said before, it is worth $450 million just in North America. That doesn't include South America and Europe, where it is an extremely popular industry as well. However, the amount of environmental downfalls by far outweighs the economic gain, and something needs to be done. There are many organizations like Farmed and Dangerous that are trying to warn people of the negative effects of fish farming in order to slow down the farming industry. Things you could do to help the environmental impact of farm fish is boycott farm fish in supermarkets. Thank you for watching, and do yourself a favor. The next time you want to enjoy a nice salmon dinner, avoid buying the farm salmon.